When nothing hurts an avoidant more than your absence, it's because absence removes the one illusion they've relied on to stay safe, control. As long as you were there, they could keep love at arm's length. They could take your care in small doses, pull back when they felt exposed, and come close again when they missed your energy. You kept the connection alive. You kept reaching. You made it easy for them to stay in the middle, never too close to feel vulnerable, never too far to feel forgotten. But when you disappear, when your energy, your voice, your presence completely vanishes, the silence hits their system harder than any argument ever could. Avoidants crave safety through distance. They feel strongest when emotions are muted and predictable. But your absence removes that predictability. It doesn't give them the space they used to enjoy. It gives them emptiness. It forces them to sit with the consequences of their avoidance, something they've spent their whole lives trying not to face. The quiet becomes unbearable because it isn't peace, it's awareness. It's realization. It's accountability echoing through the silence. At first, they try to convince themselves they're fine. They bury themselves in distractions, in work, in routines, in anyone or anything that feels safe and surface level. But then, without your emotional presence grounding them, something begins to shift. They start replaying moments. The look on your face when they withdrew. The message you sent that they ignored. The nights they went cold, thinking you'd always be there when they were ready again. For the first time, the distance doesn't feel like relief. It feels like loss. Because when an avoidant loses someone truly safe, someone patient, someone who once understood their walls, it touches a part of them they didn't know could ache this deeply. Your absence breaks the illusion that they could always return. They realize there's no longer a door waiting to be opened, no guarantee of your warmth, no soft landing after their retreat. It's gone. And that realization doesn't just sting, it shatters their sense of emotional control. They start to wonder what you're doing, if you're thinking of them, if you've already moved on. They check your online presence quietly, scroll through memories, hover over the message button but don't press it. Their silence is no longer power, it's paralysis. The very detachment that once made them feel strong now isolates them in their own emptiness. And slowly, they begin to understand what you once felt. How heavy it is to love someone who disappears every time the connection deepens. The truth is, your absence does what your presence never could. It teaches them the cost of emotional avoidance. It reveals that space isn't safety if it leads to loneliness. It shows them that peace doesn't come from escaping connection, it comes from nurturing it. And when the avoidant finally realizes that you're not waiting anymore, that you're not reaching, not hoping, not sending energy their way, they experience a kind of pain that words can't soften. Because this time, they can't blame anyone else. Your absence becomes their mirror. It reflects their choices back at them with brutal honesty. It shows them what happens when you take someone's love for granted, when you mistake patience for permanence, when you confuse being chased for being chosen. They finally feel the distance they used to create, and it doesn't feel safe anymore, it feels hollow. And yet, that's the very moment your silence becomes sacred. Because while they sit with the discomfort of their loss, you are rediscovering your peace. You're no longer waiting for half effort. You're no longer translating mixed signals into hope. You're no longer trying to make someone ready who isn't willing. You're living, healing, becoming whole again. That's the paradox of absence. It breaks them and frees you. It teaches them the meaning of loss, and it teaches you the meaning of self-respect. Because nothing hurts an avoidant more than your absence, and nothing empowers you more than realizing you no longer need their presence to feel whole. Silence reverses the power, because an avoidance detachment is not just a choice, it's a nervous system strategy. They don't pull away only because they want distance, they pull away because closeness triggers pressure inside them. Intimacy can feel like expectation. Emotional conversations can feel like danger. Your needs can feel like a demand, even when you're asking gently. So when the relationship gets real, when feelings deepen, when you want clarity, consistency, or commitment, their body reacts first. Their mind might care, but their system panics. That panic creates a familiar response: shut down, go cold, disappear, delay, and return later when it feels safer. When you used to chase, you unintentionally fed that pattern. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your chasing gave them two things avoidants crave: distance and reassurance at the same time. They could withdraw and still feel certain you were there. They could avoid emotional responsibility and still receive emotional supply. They could keep their internal world calm by pushing you away, while your messages, your explanations, your tears, your effort quietly proved that the bond was still intact. In their nervous system, it translated as, I can escape discomfort and not lose the relationship. But silence breaks that equation. Your absence isn't just a lack of communication, it's a new reality. It removes the reassurance that keeps their detachment comfortable. It replaces space with uncertainty, and uncertainty is the one thing an avoidant can't regulate with distance. Now their mind starts doing what your mind used to do. They begin scanning, wondering, checking, replaying. They start to feel the tension of not knowing. They start to feel the ache of missing you without having access to you. And this is why silence becomes so powerful, because it forces their nervous system to face what it has been avoiding: the emotional consequences of disconnection. This is also why arguments often don't affect avoidance the way absence does. An argument still means connection. Even anger still means you care enough to engage. Even tears still mean you're emotionally invested. To an avoidant, conflict can be overwhelming, but it's also familiar. They can label you too emotional, decide they need space, and retreat into control again. But when you go quiet, when you stop reacting, when you stop chasing, there's no emotional drama to blame. There's no conversation to twist. There's no chaos to hide behind. There is just your absence, and it leaves them alone with themselves. Your silence triggers a different kind of discomfort. The discomfort of losing access. And losing access doesn't just hurt their feelings, it threatens their identity. Many avoidants are used to being the one who regulates closeness. They decide when to respond, when to show affection, when to pull back, when to come forward. That control makes them feel safe. But when you choose silence, you reclaim the control you didn't even realize you had. You shift the dynamic from they withdraw, you pursue, to you are no longer available for inconsistency. That is the moment the power reverses. Now, this doesn't mean your silence is a game. If silence is used to punish, it becomes toxic for you and for them. But if silence is a boundary, it becomes healing. A boundary says, I will not keep proving my worth to someone who benefits from my effort, but avoids my needs. A boundary says, I'm not available for mixed signals. A boundary says, I will not bleed quietly just to keep this connection alive. When silence becomes a boundary, it changes your energy. You stop vibrating with anxiety and hope. You stop waiting for crumbs. You start returning to yourself. And here's the most important part. When an avoidant finally feels that shift, they often try to re-enter with low-risk contact. A simple hey, a casual check-in, a reaction to your story. I miss you. That's the nervous system trying to restore familiarity without full vulnerability. They want the comfort of reconnection without the discomfort of accountability. That is why your response matters. Not to punish them, but to set the standard. If you answer with immediate warmth and no structure, the old pattern restarts. If you respond with calm clarity, the dynamic evolves. Calm clarity sounds like, I'm open to talking, but I need honesty and consistency. Calm clarity sounds like, I'm not doing disappearing acts anymore. Calm clarity sounds like, if you want closeness, we rebuild with actions, not words. This is what teaches their nervous system a new rule. Connection is only available when it is respectful. Silence hurts an avoidant because it removes the escape hatch of control. It makes them feel what they caused. It forces awareness. And for you, it becomes the doorway back to self-respect. Because the moment you stop chasing is the moment you stop abandoning yourself. The hovering phase is what happens when an avoidant wants you back, misses you, or feels the discomfort of your absence, but still isn't ready to face the full weight of accountability. This is the stage where they circle you without landing. They want the comfort of connection, but they fear the risk of real intimacy. They want access, but they don't want exposure. And because they are afraid of your reaction, afraid of your questions, afraid of being seen as the one who hurt you, they choose the safest form of contact, indirect contact. That's why hovering rarely starts with a real apology. It starts with little signals that create a doorway without requiring courage, a story view, a like, a reaction emoji, a casual, a meme, a random question about something they could have Googled. I hope you're doing okay. Just checking in. These messages are designed to test the water. They are not always calculated or evil, but they are cautious. They are meant to see if you're still emotionally available, still soft, still reachable, still willing to respond quickly. If you respond warmly, they feel relief. If you respond coldly, they feel rejection. If you don't respond at all, they feel the sting of losing control. The hovering phase is confusing because it looks like care, but it doesn't feel like repair. It feels like someone knocking softly on the door, but refusing to say why they came. It feels like someone wanting emotional access without emotional responsibility. And that's the core truth. Hovering is usually an attempt to reconnect without risking the discomfort of owning what happened. Avoidants hover because their nervous system is split. One part of them craves you, the safety you provided, the comfort of your attention, the stability of your presence. Another part of them is terrified of what comes with you: expectations, closeness, emotional conversations, conflict, accountability. So they try to get you back in a way that doesn't trigger their panic. They choose low-intensity contact so they can pull away instantly if they feel overwhelmed. It's like keeping one foot outside the door while pretending they came inside. This is where you must become very honest with yourself, because hovering can activate your hope. It can make you think, they're changing, they're coming back, and maybe they do miss you. Maybe they are thinking about you. But missing you is not the same as being ready to treat you better. An avoidant can genuinely miss you and still be emotionally unsafe. They can want you and still avoid accountability. They can feel regret and still repeat the same patterns the moment closeness returns. So the hovering phase is a test, not of your love, but of your boundaries. If you respond instantly, if you accept crumbs, if you reward low effort contact with full emotional access, the avoidance nervous system learns the old lesson again. I don't have to change to keep you. I just have to reappear. I just have to send something small. And your heart, because it wants relief from absence, may accept it. But accepting it too easily often reopens the cycle that hurt you in the first place. The healthiest way to handle hovering is to stop treating it like proof and start treating it like data. Data tells you what kind of contact they are capable of. Data tells you whether they can be direct. Data tells you whether they can tolerate your standards. When you receive a hovering message, you don't need to punish them, and you don't need to chase them into a deeper conversation. You can respond with calm structure. You can say something that opens the door only for maturity, not for confusion. For example, you can reply, "If you want to talk, I'm open to a real conversation. But I'm not available for vague check-ins." Or, "I'm doing well. If you're reaching out to repair, speak clearly." This kind of response does something powerful. It forces them to choose. Either they step into accountability, or they retreat. And if they retreat, that tells you they were not here for repair. they were here for relief. Hovering feels intense because it activates attachment, uncertainty, and hope. But your job is to stay grounded. The point is not to ignore your feelings, the point is to protect them. If they want you back, they must be able to handle the truth of what they did, the impact on you, and the work it takes to rebuild trust. Anything less is not a return, it's a repeat. Absence becomes powerful only when it stops being a weapon and starts being a boundary. A weapon is used to make someone feel pain, so they come running back. A boundary is used to protect your peace so you stop bleeding. The difference is everything. Because if your silence is a weapon, you stay emotionally chained to their reaction. You keep checking, waiting, hoping, wanting them to feel it. But if your silence is a boundary, you detach from the outcome. You stop performing love to earn love. You stop proving your worth to someone who keeps questioning it with their behavior. An avoidant often survives by controlling closeness. They decide when connection happens, how deep it gets, and when it stops. They pull away when intimacy rises, then return when loneliness hits, because loneliness is uncomfortable, but vulnerability is terrifying. And if you keep your door open through every retreat, you unknowingly teach them that your availability is permanent, even when their effort is temporary. That becomes the cycle. They disappear, you chase. They return, you forgive. They relax, they disappear again. It drains you slowly, not in one dramatic moment, but in 1,000 small disappointments. So absence as a boundary is your refusal to repeat that pattern. It is you saying, I'm not going to keep reaching into a space where my needs are treated like pressure. It is you saying, I'm not going to keep being the one who holds the relationship together while you run from accountability. It is you saying, if you want access to me, the access comes with respect, clarity, and consistency. This kind of absence isn't cold, it's clean. It's not an emotional tantrum, it's emotional maturity. It's you stepping out of a dynamic that made you smaller. Because the truth is, in many avoidant relationships, you don't lose them all at once, you lose yourself slowly. You start negotiating your standards. You start editing your feelings. You start speaking softly so they don't shut down. You start accepting less so they don't leave. And then one day you realize, you've been protecting their comfort more than you've been protecting your heart. A boundary restores your self-respect because it forces you to align your actions with your values. It makes you stop saying, I deserve consistency, while still rewarding inconsistency. It makes you stop saying, I want emotional safety, while still staying available to emotional unpredictability. It makes you stop betraying yourself in the name of love. And that is the true shift. You stop making love an audition where you keep performing until they finally choose you. Absence as a boundary also heals your nervous system. When you're with an avoidant who pulls away, your body can enter a constant state of alert. You become hyper, aware of tone shifts, response times, distance, mood changes. You read silence like danger. You overthink. You try to fix things quickly so you don't lose them. That anxiety is not just in your mind, it's in your body. So when you create distance, not to punish, but to regulate yourself, your body finally gets the message, I am safe. Not because they changed, but because you stopped placing your safety in their hands. And here's what happens when your absence is truly a boundary. If they reach out with hovering, vague check-ins, or low-effort contact, you don't rush to respond with full access. You respond with structure. You respond with clarity. You keep the standard. Because boundaries only work when they are consistent. If you collapse the boundary the moment they touch it lightly, you teach them that your boundary is negotiable. But when you hold it calmly, you teach them that your self-respect is real. This is where many people struggle, because the old you wants relief. The old you wants to feel chosen. The old you wants to believe their message means change. But the healed you understands something deeper. The goal isn't to get them back. The goal is to stop losing yourself. The goal is to create a life where your emotional stability doesn't depend on someone else's availability. If they come back with accountability, patience, and consistent action, the boundary becomes the foundation for something healthier. If they come back with excuses, pressure, or disappearing acts, the boundary becomes the door that keeps you protected. Either way, you win, because your absence is no longer a cry for them to notice you. It becomes proof that you finally noticed yourself. The most dangerous mistake people make in avoidant dynamics is confusing missing you with being ready for repair. An avoidant can miss you deeply and still be emotionally unsafe. They can feel lonely, nostalgic, guilty, even obsessed, and still not have the capacity to show up with consistency, accountability, and emotional presence. That's why this keynote matters, because if you don't understand the difference, you will mistake their hunger for your presence as proof of love, and you'll reopen the door to the same pattern that broke you. Missing you is a feeling. Repair is a decision. Missing you often appears when your absence removes comfort. They miss the emotional soothing you provided. They miss the validation. They miss the stability of knowing you were there. They miss the warmth, the attention, the sense of being wanted. Sometimes they even miss the way you tolerated their distance, the way you forgave quickly, the way you made it easy for them to return without consequences. And because avoidants struggle with emotional discomfort, missing you can feel intense. But intensity is not maturity. Intensity is not change. Intensity is not a plan. Being ready for repair looks different. It doesn't start with hovering and breadcrumbs. It starts with clarity. A person ready for repair speaks directly. They name what they did. They acknowledge impact. They apologize without excuses. They don't rush you to forgive. They don't guilt you for having boundaries. They don't treat your pain like a problem to get rid of. They treat your pain like a reality to honor. They come with humility, not entitlement. So if an avoidant returns and says, "I miss you," that might be true, but it's not enough. The question is, do they also say, "I understand how I hurt you"? Do they ask what you need to feel safe? Do they accept that rebuilding trust will take time? Do they show patience when you're guarded? Do they remain consistent after the first emotional moment passes? Because the real test is not what they do when they're lonely. The real test is what they do when closeness returns and their nervous system starts to panic again. Many avoidants return in what looks like softness, but it's actually seeking relief. Relief from guilt. Relief from loneliness. Relief from the feeling of losing control. They want you to respond, so their anxiety calms down. They want reassurance that you're still there, so the threat of loss disappears. And once the threat disappears, they often relax back into the same patterns: less effort, more distance, delayed communication, emotional shutdown. That is why you must treat words as the opening scene, not the whole movie. A person ready for repair will accept your standard. They won't argue with it. They won't call you cold for protecting yourself. They won't say, "Why can't you just let it go?" They won't demand immediate closeness as proof of love. They will understand that trust is rebuilt by repetition. Repetition of consistency. Repetition of respect. Repetition of emotional presence. And they will do that work even when it feels uncomfortable. Even when you don't reward them instantly. Even when their pride wants to escape. Your role in this keynote is to become a wise gatekeeper. Not a bitter one. A wise one. You don't need to punish them. You don't need to prove a point. You simply need to stop giving full access to someone who has not demonstrated full responsibility. You can respond calmly and clearly, "I hear you. If you want to repair, I need accountability and consistent action. I'm not available for vague contact." That one sentence protects you from being pulled back into emotional confusion. And if they do step up, you still move slowly. You watch how they handle discomfort. You watch how they respond to boundaries. You watch whether they communicate when they feel overwhelmed instead of disappearing. You watch whether they are building safety or just chasing relief. Because the truth is, missing you is easy. It happens in their comfort zone, in private, in nostalgia, in longing. Repair is hard. Repair happens in real time, face to face with consequences, with humility, with changed behavior. And the moment you can separate those two, you stop being manipulated by longing, even your own longing. You stop letting hope override evidence. You stop treating temporary emotion as permanent transformation. You begin choosing the kind of love that doesn't just miss you when you're gone, but honors you when you're here.